Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We're going to be tackling a really juicy one today. Law 3 from Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Conceal your intentions.
Ooh, concealing intentions.
I know, right? We're going to be looking at all sorts of stories and strategies from history, and we're going to examine both the successes and failures of people who have tried to employ this law.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people misunderstand what power really is.
Right. And I think that this law really highlights that power is not always about brute force, but about subtlety.
Exactly. It's about deception, misdirection, keeping people guessing.
So one of the first techniques Green highlights is this idea of decoyed objects of desire and red herrings, basically throwing people off the scent.
Oh, yeah, I love that he uses this story about Ninon de l'Enclos.
Ninon de l'Enclos, yeah. She was a 17th century French courtesan and a master of the game.
Not only beautiful and witty, but also a very shrewd strategist.
A powerful woman. She even mentored young men on the art of seduction.
Oh, wow.
And Green uses this story of a young marquis who was head over heels for a countess.
Okay.
But this countess, she was playing hard to get.
Classic.
Right. And so Ninon advised him against directly confessing his love.
Yeah.
Which was apparently a huge no-no.
Yeah, I mean, we might think that being direct is always the best, but sometimes it's better to be a little more strategic.
So what did Ninon suggest instead?
Well, she understood the power of suggestion. So instead of being direct, she advised him to be aloof, almost like he was only interested in friendship.
Oh, so like playing hard to get.
Exactly. And to make things even more confusing, she told him to start showing up at social gatherings with other beautiful women.
Oh my gosh, playing with fire.
It was all part of the strategy. By seeming interested in other women, he would spark jealousy and make himself more desirable. You know, it's like creating an illusion of scarcity.
I can see how that would work. You're dangling a carrot, but you never let them catch it.
Precisely, you keep them wanting more. And she also advised him to be unpredictable with his appearances.
Ooh, interesting.
Like sometimes he would be at every social event, sometimes he would be conspicuously absent.
So it's all about creating that sense of mystery and intrigue.
Absolutely. It piques curiosity, fuels the imagination, draws the other person in. And it was working for a while. The Countess was becoming more and more intrigued.
Until he ruined it all.
He got impatient and decided to confess his love directly.
Oh, no. The classic rookie mistake.
And it totally backfired. The moment he revealed his true intentions, the game was up.
It's like bursting a bubble. You know, all that mystery is gone, and it just feels calculated.
Right. And it's important to understand that people, even when they know they're being led, they kind of enjoy it, you know? It's a form of play, but the moment the intention is revealed, it loses its appeal.
So what's the key takeaway here? What can we learn from the Marquis's blunder?
I think the big lesson is that suggestion is often far more powerful than just saying what you want. It's about creating that mystery, sparking curiosity, letting the other person draw their own conclusions.
This is making me think, have you ever felt drawn in by someone's actions? You know, not knowing where they were leading you?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all experienced that kind of intrigue at some point. It's just human nature.
Yeah, it's like we like to solve puzzles. You know, we're drawn to the unknown.
So instead of stating our desires directly, we need to create that intrigue.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really interesting technique for concealing intentions.
Okay, what's that?
Smoke screens.
Smoke screens. Sounds kind of sneaky.
Well, it is a bit, it's about creating a distraction, a facade that hides your true motives.
So you're basically trying to mislead people.
It's like a magician using misdirection to pull off a grand illusion, you know?
Oh, I see. So the audience is focused on one thing while
Yeah.
the real magic is happening somewhere else.
Precisely. And one of the best examples of this comes from the story of Yellow Kid Whale.
Oh, Yellow Kid Whale, the con artist.
Yeah, he was a master of deception.
Yeah.
He really understood how to exploit people's psychology.
Yeah, Green talks about how he would use people's trust in appearances and their tendency to be distracted by the familiar.
Right. And he had this elaborate conning he pulled off in 1910. This guy named Sam Giesel was his target. Okay, I remember this Giesel was a wealthy businessman who was always looking for the next big deal.
And Weil knew exactly how to play him. He approached Giesel with what seemed like a legitimate business opportunity, a chance to buy a hunting lodge from a group of millionaires.
Okay, and this hunting lodge was the smokescreen.
Exactly. It was the bait, the distraction.
So what was the real con?
A rigged boxing match.
A boxing match.
Weil pretended to be a boxing trainer, and he introduced Diesel to this fighter named George Gross, who was, of course, another con artist.
Wait, so he used the hunting lodge deal to get Giesel interested in a boxing match?
Exactly. And Giesel was so focused on this potential windfall from the lodge that he totally missed the red flags with this boxer.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, Gross was middle-aged, out of shape, not exactly a prime fighter.
Oh my gosh.
But Giesel, blinded by the idea of making a quick buck, just ignored all these warning signs.
So he was so caught up in this idea of a sure thing that he missed the obvious signs.
That's the power of the familiar. You know, Giesel was in his comfort zone. He thought he was just doing a normal business deal.
He never suspected it was all a setup.
And that's what's so brilliant about it, you know? Our minds crave patterns. We like things to be predictable.
So we tend to assume things are what they seem, especially when it fits with our understanding of how things work.
Exactly. So Weil created this whole scenario that seemed totally normal to Giesel, the world of business deals and money.
And within that safe environment, he slipped in this rigged boxing match.
It's crazy.
And then he even used the supposed death of the boxer as a distraction to escape with Giesel's money.
Oh, yeah, that was a classic move. He knew that in a moment of panic, Giesel would just want to get out of there.
And he wouldn't be thinking straight.
It's amazing how easily we can be misled when our attention is diverted.
This smokescreen technique is powerful stuff.
Absolutely. And it's not just con artists who use this throughout history. Leaders, politicians, even everyday people have used smokescreens to get what they want.
Okay, so I'm curious how this played out in a different context. Green also mentions Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, as a master of using smokescreens.
Oh, yeah. Selassie's story is a great example of how appearing harmless can actually be a really effective tactic.
Really?
Especially when you're dealing with someone who is paranoid.
Okay, so how did he use it?
Well, in the 1920s, Selassie was trying to consolidate his power in Ethiopia, but he was facing resistance from this powerful warlord named Dejazmak Balcha.
Oh yeah, Balcha. He was known for being really suspicious.
Exactly. And he was really threatened by Selassie, especially because Selassie presented himself as this gentle, peace-loving ruler.
Interesting, so Balcha didn't trust him.
Not one bit. And when Balcha marched on the capital, Addis Ababa, with his army of 10,000 men, it was a direct challenge to Selassie's authority.
That's a tense situation. How did Selassie handle that?
Instead of meeting force with force, which could have led to a huge war, Selassie decided to be more strategic. He invited Balcha to this big, fancy banquet in his honor.
A banquet? That seems risky.
It was a calculated risk. Selassie knew that Balcha would be expecting some kind of trickery.
So he let Balcha bring his own guards?
Yeah, like 600 of his most loyal soldiers.
So he was giving Balcha a false sense of security.
Exactly. And throughout the banquet, Selassie treated Balcha with so much respect. He was praising him, making him feel like the most important person there.
Wow. So he played right into Balcha's ego.
And while Balcha was enjoying all this attention, Selassie was secretly making his own moves.
What was he doing?
He sent another army to Balcha's encampment.
To attack?
Not to attack, to buy off Balcha's entire army.
Right. He bought an army.
He had his troops show up with chests full of gold and silver, offering to buy the weapons of Balcha's soldiers.
Wow. So by the time Balcha got back to his camp, his army was gone.
Disarmed and scattered, it was brilliant.
He totally outmaneuvered him.
Balcha thought he was so clever, but he had no idea what Selassie was really up to.
It's like what we were talking about before. You can be so focused on one thing that you completely miss what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So we've seen how effective these decoys and smoke screens can be, but it's kind of scary to think that people might not be what they seem.
Right.
I mean, how do we even navigate this without being paranoid all the time?
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. You don't want to be suspicious of everyone, but you also need to have some healthy skepticism.
So how do we do that? What can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, Green has some really interesting advice. He talks about the importance of having a bland, unreadable exterior, almost like a poker face.
Poker face. So we all need to become master poker players.
Oh, no, it's not about being emotionless or anything. It's more about being composed, making it hard for others to read you.
So it's about controlling how others see you.
Exactly. If people can't figure out what you're thinking, then they can't manipulate you as easily.
That's like a defense mechanism.
Green gives examples of historical figures like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Baron James Rothschild, who were famous for their ability to hide their true thoughts and feelings.
And that helped them be more effective leaders.
Absolutely. It created this aura of mystery and unpredictability, which can be really disarming.
Okay, so besides the poker face, what else can we do?
Green also talks about using noble gestures and established patterns as smokescreens.
Okay, how do those work?
Well, noble gestures, those acts of generosity or selflessness, they can be really powerful in disarming suspicion.
I guess so. Yeah, people tend to assume good intentions when they see someone doing something nice.
Right. But sometimes those gestures are actually calculated moves
Oh, wow.
to further someone's own interests.
So it's not always what it seems.
Exactly. Green uses the example of Joseph Duveen, the art dealer. He played a big role in creating the National Gallery of Art.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. He was considered a big supporter of the arts.
He was, but he was
Yeah.
also a very smart businessman. He convinced all these wealthy collectors to donate their paintings to the gallery.
Which seemed like a really generous thing to do.
On the surface, yeah, but it actually served his purposes too.
How so?
Well, it helped his clients reduce their taxes, for one thing.
I see.
And by encouraging these donations, he was basically controlling the supply of valuable artwork, which drove up prices.
So he was benefiting from this whole thing.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how many other seemingly noble acts were actually motivated by self-interest.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about using patterns as a smokescreen?
Right. So by establishing a predictable course of action, you basically lull people into a false sense of security.
Oh, that's interesting. So they don't expect anything to change.
And then when you do something unexpected, it really throws them off.
I see.
Green gives the example of Jay Gould, the financier. He used this tactic to eventually take control of Western Union.
How did he do that?
Well, he would buy a lot of shares in a company and then threaten to sell them unless the company bought him out at a higher price.
Okay.
And the directors, they always assumed he was just trying to make a quick profit, so they would agree.
Yeah, makes sense.
But then Gould would just repeat the process, buy more shares, force another buyout.
So he was playing the long game?
Yeah, he was slowly wearing them down. Wow, that's clever.
And in the end, he was able to take over the whole company.
So the lesson here is to not just accept things at face value.
Right. What seems simple and predictable could actually be part of something much bigger.
So how do we protect ourselves from all of this?
It really comes down to being observant and using critical thinking,
Okay.
Pay attention to things that don't add up question. Appearances, don't be afraid to challenge assumptions, even with people you trust.
So it's about staying alert, being aware of these tactics that people might be using.
Exactly. The more we understand about these things, the better we can navigate the world.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Law 3, Conceal Your Intentions. It's amazing how much we can learn from history.
Yeah, and these principles of power, they're still relevant today.
They apply to so many aspects of our lives.
Our personal relationships, our work, even politics.
So to wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you would give to our listeners?
I would say be observant, be strategic, and never underestimate the power of concealing your intentions. Great advice. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. And to our listeners, stay tuned for our next deep dive, where we'll uncover another one of the 48 laws of power. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those intentions concealed.